Welcome back to Legal Threads, where we pull apart the cases that weave the fabric of our legal system. Today, we're diving into Hamer v. Sidway, a classic New York Court of Appeals decision from 1891 that helped define what counts as valid consideration in contract law. The story starts at a golden wedding celebration in 1869. William E. Story, Sr., in front of family and guests, promised his young nephew, William E. Story II, that if he refrained from drinking, smoking, swearing, and gambling until his 21st birthday, he'd receive $5,000. The nephew agreed, and remarkably, he kept that promise all the way to adulthood. On his 21st birthday, the nephew wrote to his uncle saying, "I've done what I agreed to do. Now I'm entitled to the money." The uncle replied in a letter, acknowledging that his nephew had earned it, and even confirmed that he had the money set aside. But he insisted on holding on to it until he thought his nephew was old enough to manage it wisely. The nephew agreed, but the uncle never actually paid. Years later, the uncle died without handing over a cent, and the nephew's claim eventually made its way through the courts. The legal question was straightforward but powerful: was this promise enforceable, or was it void for lack of consideration? The estate argued that there was no consideration. After all, wasn't the nephew better off not drinking, smoking, swearing, or gambling? How could giving up something harmful to yourself be considered a detriment? The Court of Appeals disagreed. They emphasized the principle that consideration doesn't depend on whether the promisee benefits or suffers. In fact, it only matters that the promisee gave up a legal right at the request of the promisor. The nephew had a legal right to engage in those activities, and he surrendered that right for years. That was enough to constitute valid consideration. The holding, the uncle's promise was enforceable. The nephew's forbearance was a legal detriment, and that detriment supported the contract. The judgment of the lower appellate court was reversed, and the trial court's decision in favor of the plaintiff was affirmed. This case is still taught today because it perfectly illustrates how contract law evaluates consideration. It's not about whether the deal was fair or beneficial, it's about whether there was a bargain for exchange. Even giving something up that seems good for you can still serve as the legal price of a promise. That's Hamer v. Sidway, a cornerstone case reminding us that when it comes to contracts, the law cares less about whether you made a good deal and more about whether you made a deal at all. Thanks for listening to Legal Threads. Remember to like and subscribe for more stories from the cases that shape our world.